Welcome, everyone. Episode 19 of the Dolphins Make Me Cry podcast. I'm your host, Steve Giordano. And man, the Fool's Gold 3-game win streak snapped on Thanksgiving night against the Packers at Lambeau in the cold, 30-17. And boy, do we have a lot to unpack. Softness, death by 1,000 paper cuts in this game. Where do we go from here? Slim playoff chances. There's a lot to talk about right now as we ramp up in the league in December. And I am going to be fired up here. I'm warning you now. Probably a little negative. I'm warning you now. But I'll try to compartmentalize the podcast for everybody. So, as we go back to Thanksgiving night, Dolphins going into this game, having won 3 in a row, getting themselves to 5-6, huge game, big spot, playoffs, on the line, essentially, kind of a playoff game in some regards. And I picked them to lose because of the way they play in these games in the cold, in prime time, in big spots. You're not going to fool me. I've been here too long watching this team. You got to prove me right because most of the time you've proved me wrong. And they come out, and a lot of people have talked about the cold, which we're going to talk about here, and the fact that their record in the cold is basically horrendous. And, I think it's like 1-8 in the last 9. And the reality is they play, 2 to 3 of these games a year, obviously the back end of the season. This wasn't a game that was lost because of the cold only. The cold was part of the overall story. You start out the game, first of all, ding, 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 special teams. If Danny Crossman has a job the day on Black Monday, I will eat this shirt, because how he, as a special teams coordinator, would continue to be employed when their special teams has been in the bottom half of the league for 3 years is beyond me. So to start the game, they kick short, and boom, big return, Packers set up at the 40, right? So right off the bat, you set the tone for the game. And I get it. It's not the end of the world, but again, I said death by 1,000 paper cuts. That's the way this game went. So again, it lends itself to your special teams is pretty poor all year. It cost you games last year. You start out in a big spot, and it just is that tone setter. And I hate it because it's on the road. You kick the ball off. You love to have it, at the beginning of the half, which they typically want, whether they win the toss or not. And you just get the game going for the other team on the road. You get the fans into it. It just makes no sense to me. And I get it. Okay, maybe he couldn't have kicked it out of the end zone, the wind, the cold, what have you. But, there needs to be better coverage. So now they're starting on the 40, and then your defense starts out with a lights-out drive. They're stuffing the run. They're all over the place. They take a deep shot. We had no shot, and now you're getting the ball back 3 and out. So you stop the bleeding after the kickoff. And what happens? Malik Washington, rookie, punt returner, and here's where the quote-unquote cold bites you. Doesn't know how to manage it. But here's where the bad special teams plays into that, and I'm going to say that over the weather again. He's fielding punts in Miami within the 5-yard line, between the 10 to the 5-yard line. Why? Let it go. Let it bounce. I'd rather you get the ball on the 1 than you misplace the way you're catching the ball, and now we have a muff punt, and boom, momentum again. Packers on the 5, they go in a couple of plays, bang, 7-0. Self-inflicted wounds continue to plague this team on special teams number 1. So now you're down 7-0. And now, okay, what happens? It's just that pressure that just starts to come and it starts to build. And then offensively, look, your O-line has played fairly well the entire year. But let's face facts. It's played fairly well against inferior opponents. And it's middling at best. And when you play upper echelon teams, you're going to get exposed. And it goes to the whole being, I think the stat is 1-15, Mike McDaniel is against teams with a winning record in his last 16 games, in the 3 years he's been here. That's the problem. Now, that's the macro. The micro is the trenches on this team are not good. They're times, but they're not good enough to win against good teams in the cold. Not because of the cold. Again, that game could have been in Miami. Maybe it's a closer game, fine, but your trenches are not good enough. So now, and again, Mike McDaniel's, for all of his flaws, he's smart enough to, I think, sometimes know the things he can and cannot do. Yeah, did he try to run the ball some? Of course he did. But he also knew that they weren't going to hold up. So the run game, albeit I want to see it more of it and being committed to it and all that good stuff, sometimes in fairness to a coach, they know their team. They know what the strengths and the weaknesses are. If you cannot block and win in the trenches, look, your running back doesn't have much of a chance. So automatically in this game, you didn't have a great run game. You had this 36-yard rushing attack that you had in the game. Just wasn't good enough. So now to Tua. His stats were very good. I'm actually going to give you the exact stats. I believe he was 37 of 40 or 37 of 46 and 375 yards, something along those lines it was. He had good stats. He did enough. But again, it's kind of fugazi in this regard. He's checked down, dumping everything underneath, number one. And they're giving him the yards. They're just not giving him the points. And then what kills you about him, and again, he wasn't the reason you lost, but he also wasn't the reason you won. You had right going into the second half, you had two particular throws that he overthrew his receiver that at 21-3, you could have went into halftime 21-10, 21-11. And then on top of it, you don't get any points. You go for it on a fourth down, and you gave them 3 to go down 24-3 at the half. You're dead man walking. You have little to no shot in that game when you go into the half 24-3. And I also feel that the way that they play, Mike McDaniel, everything's it's rushed. Slow down, brother. Everything doesn't have to be a track meet. Everything doesn't have to be a race. Play the game, play the clock, play the play clock, use timeouts correctly. But everything is bam, 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 bam. Now it's fourth down. Let's go for every fourth down. No. And it's just a sign of poor coaching. And it kills you in these games. It's like the lights are on and they're just too bright for you because we got to make moves. We got to go for every fourth down. No. Then we get to the second half. And of course, as happens in most games, these teams are competitive. You're going to start mounting a comeback. They make some plays on defense. The defense is kind of doing some things, even though we're not giving them a hall pass because they had 20 missed tackles. 20. Now, is that a factor of cold? Partially, probably. Is that a factor of poor technique and just not being good enough on the trenches, in the secondary, your linebackers? It's a mixture of all of it. But you get back in the game and you're driving and you have a 2nd and goal on the 2. And this is where good teams with fundamental trenches that can pound the rock and believe in it, and lo and behold, those are the top 5 teams in the conference that are going to be in the playoffs: the Bills, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Chiefs. Wow, isn't it amazing how that works? The most physical teams are the ones that are in the top spots in the conference. Amazing. You have 2nd and goal. You take one run play and you throw it twice, going on fourth down, and bam, game over. Now, would you have won the game if you would have scored there? Would you have prolonged it probably. You probably weren't going to win it, but whatever. Explain to me how we have a fullback, Alec Ingold, who's a good player. They just named him the Dolphin Man of the Year. He's great in the community. He's great parents. I've met them. Like, he's a solid dude. He's your fullback, one of the few teams in the league with a fullback. Please explain to me why he gets blown up. You don't overload the line. You don't line up in an I formation, and you don't smash the ball to a running back behind Ingold and another lineman for 3 straight downs. Please explain it to me, because it doesn't make sense. 0 sense does it make. Although, here's the sense that it does make. You didn't build a physical football team. You built speed, track meet. We're gonna be faster than everybody. You know, that's real cute until somebody punches you in the face on the football field. It's real cute. And that, my friends, is the microcosm of why this team is now 5-7 and has a completely disappointing season, because GM Chris Greer, head coach Mike McDaniel, organization, everybody involved, they do not believe in physical football. Period. The fucking end of the story. They don't believe in it. And until the day they say, we believe in this, and this is the formula to win, and build the trenches and not overpay fast players who are in their 30s, they will never win anything. Period. That game last week, and I'm fired up, I'm sorry. That game last week was an absolute microcosm of 25 years of what this organization has fucked up. Plain and simple. Because for 25 years, it's been cutesy, cutesy, cutesy. It doesn't win, brother. It doesn't win. It doesn't win against playoff teams. It doesn't win in the cold. It doesn't win when things get tough. You have to line up man on man in the trenches and pound the guy in front of you. And then, yes, you need talent at the quarterback position. You need a quarterback who can make plays, who can lead the offense, who can do things. That 100% you need it. You can't just have trenches and no quarterback play. I'm not saying that. But you want to talk about frustrating. The Packers are a good team. The Packers are a better team than you. But guess what? Could you have beat the Packers? Yep, you could have. They didn't have like their greatest game. But what did they do? They ran you over. Oh, and I forgot this part about the fact that they ran you over with 20 missed tackles and over, I think it was 137 yards rushing. Chris Brooks, who we drafted last year, who a lot of Dolphin fans and people in the media really liked from a physicality perspective. He got hurt last year. He was dinged up in the training camp. They end up cutting him. He comes out and himself almost had as many rushing yards as the Dolphins had. Laughable. And here's where it's even more laughable. Yes, you signed and you have on your roster 4 running backs. But guess what? You have Jeff Wilson, who we like. He never plays. If you were going to keep him on the roster and never play him, you should have kept Brooks, a young physical runner, developed him. You drafted him last year. You know Jeff Wilson he's not going to be here next year. It's amazing he made it this year on the roster. And what happened? A better organization took your trash and made it their treasure because they know how to use them. They know how to be a physical, smash mouth, run you over, run game. And I got news for you. Look at their offensive line. They didn't go out and sign the world in free agency, the Packers. They drafted well. They developed well. And guess what? Yes, they've had very good luck in quarterbacks over the years. Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love. But you know what they really have had good luck, and it goes very unknown and unsung? Really good offensive line play. A physical mentality. And guess what? that helps a young quarterback, a young Rodgers in the day, a young Jordan Love these last 2 years. It helps them. 8 wins they have. It's absolutely laughable. Now, what backs up all of my arguments here? I'll tell you what. Jordan Brooks, first-year linebacker here from Seattle, end of the game, says, and I quote, "I feel a lot of us, or a lot of guys, played soft and the cold affected them." Eureka. Wow. So you got a guy on your own team who, in all intents and purposes, watching the game, played hard-nosed player, linebacker, hitter. Like he looks like a guy, like he plays the part. I don't look at him and say he's soft. Played fairly well. He's coming out and saying that. You had guys on the Packers saying they're soft. How much more do you need to see or hear if you are Steve Ross to understand that this is not working? They're soft. He's saying they're soft. We watched that they're soft. Other teams see that they're soft. In big spots and big moments in the cold, they don't step up. And again, you have to, in making the decisions here, you have to let this play out. We have 5 games to go. You can't make decisions today. You got to see the whole body of work. Now, the body of work, even if you won 5 in a row, which is not happening, and I'll talk about some playoff implications as we proceed here. Okay, even if you won 5 in a row, and then you went into the playoffs, and you went to Buffalo, Kansas City, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, you're going to get your doors blown off because you're going to go to a cold element, which obviously you can't play in or win in, and you're going to play teams that are going to literally run you over. Like, all those teams have very good quarterbacks. They might not have to throw it one time against you. They'll just hand it off and run it down your throat. And then on top of it, they'll wait for you to make, the 10 mistakes that you typically make a game. And we'll throw in the 10 penalties we just had last week because, God knows we can't have a game without 10 penalties against a good team. We play bad teams, we have 2 penalties, 3 penalties. We play good teams, it's 10 penalties, 20 missed tackles, 100 yards that we basically gave them for free. It's not going to work. So, as we then analyze this, I want to know, and it's going to be very interesting to see what they do, although I really feel I kind of know what they're going to do. How do you address this? You built a soft team. You paid a soft team. You got guys on the books on your soft team. It's going to be crazy interesting. And again, I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole of next year when we're in this year, but my prediction of that would be Greer ain't going nowhere. McDaniel got an extension. He ain't going nowhere. You're going to go into next year. You're going to run it back. You're going to plug some holes and fine. Okay? Because I don't think you can fire everybody for the sake of firing everybody. But here's what I want to know, and we'll never know it. At what point does somebody who's got the balls in that building to go to Ross, to Greer, to Garfinkel, to McDaniel, and say, the style we play does not work. Physicality in the NFL, as much as they want to take away big hits and hard hits and all the stuff we saw in the 80s and 90s, as much as they want to take it away, the core of the game will always be physicality. Now, it's been harnessed, but you still can smash the guy in front of you. That's how this works. You just need to do it in a more legal way. No cheap shots, no, late hits on quarterbacks, head shots, knee shot, but everything else, fair game. Who in the building will have the balls to say all of our asses are on the line, and if we don't adopt a physical style, we're all going to be gone next year? That's the question. Because if they all sit here and pat themselves on the back and say, oh, well, we had Tua's injury and, we could have won this game, that game, the other game, you're fooling yourself. Even with Tua healthy, you definitely should have won and probably would have won 2 to 3 more games, but it would remain the same. You would have been the leading 6 or 7 seed, and you still would have had the same result in the playoffs against a physical team. So that is the conversation that somebody has to have the balls to have to Ross to see where we're going to go moving forward. Because we cannot anymore sell this fan base on the cutesy speed, the this, the that, the misdirection. Like, it's trickery, it's tomfoolery, it's not sustainable. Can it win you some games? Yes. Is it going to win you playoff games? Hell no. It won't even get you there. And on top of it, you need to be basically 100% healthy the whole year to get there, which is virtually impossible. And it's just, to me, they're in such a bad spot because at least the other years when you were, that 500, 8-8, 8-9, when they added the 17 game, and you weren't paying a million guys and you didn't have top-notch, top-end talent on the top end of the roster, it was different. At least you had some excuse. Now you don't have an excuse. Now you just built a poorly constructed roster, paying too many guys that don't deserve to be paid in positions that aren't garnering you playoff wins. So very frustrating, very fired up here on what went on that Thursday game. And again, I didn't have high hopes, but at some point you're like, hey, is this the game? You turn it around. But again, you don't got the horses. You're not going to win the Kentucky Derby without the horse. It's as simple as that. So where we go from here as we end that Packers game disaster chapter, where we go from here looking to this week at home against the Jets. Obviously, the Jets have had their trouble. 3-9, Aaron Rodgers, they've had injuries, fired coaches, fired GMs, moving play callers, like you name it, they've dealt with it. And I find it really, really interesting in the media down here. They really make it seem like, oh, the Jets are a dumpster fire. And then they kind of act like the Dolphins aren't. Like, you're kind of a dumpster fire too. It's a little bit more packaged and put together dumpster fire, but you're pretty damn close. So South Florida media, I would stop throwing bricks when you live in a glass house, number one. So going into this game, the Jets last week, they had a lead, 3-touchdown lead. It was a 26-3 or something like that. And they blew the lead. Rodgers loses again. It's probably as low as it could be right now for the Jets. To me, that's dangerous. Because, albeit we're very good against bad teams, we beat up on them for 3 years. They're keeping Rodgers in. They have really no reason to not because they have nobody to play that they're going to develop. And, I mean, I don't know if the guy wants to go out the way he's going out. He's not the player he was. He's definitely been battling injuries. I think that's probably a big factor behind it. But when he's sitting back there and you give him time and he can make throws, he will still make throws. Now, if you get him moving and this and that, he's going to miss stuff, and he's had a very, very bad year. And overall, they have a lot of injuries. They don't have the run game they had a year ago or 2 years ago. They certainly don't have the defense that they had. But I will say this. If the Dolphins go into this game and they do not do what they need to do, which is we beat up bad teams, do not be shocked if they lose a crazy tight, hey, we made a lot of mistakes and a few turnovers and we lose by a field goal or 1 or 2 point game. Do not be shocked. And if that happened, season over. Now, when it comes to playoff implications, essentially they have to win out and the Broncos would need to lose 2 and you'd get in. I mean, good luck with that. Yeah, would it be amazing to see? Sure. I know what's going to happen. I've seen the script. They're going to end up going 8-9. They're going to win this game against the Jets. They're probably going to squeak it out, and then you're going to get blown out next week in Houston, and that'll be all she wrote. And then you'll win a couple of these games down the stretch, just because that's what they do. They go this 8-9, and we live in the 13th draft pick for life, and we never can get over the hump. Like I've seen this movie a million times. That being said, as we prepare for this game, they need to come out being pissed off about people calling them soft, pissed off about the fact that they're not physical enough. They need to run the Jets over. If that doesn't happen, you'll have zero. I mean, right now, if you ask me, are they going to beat Houston? I'd say 0 shot. If you don't beat the Jets handedly, I'd say it's a -20. You need to come out this week and bludgeon them and run them over and just play the best game you've played all year against a team that's not any good. But again, be careful. Division opponent, Aaron Rodgers, pride. They're not going to lay down and die for you. And not for nothing. Yes, they've had a terrible year, but they've been in a lot of these games and they've just found ways to lose them. It's not necessarily that they're getting blown out in these games. So you have to keep that in mind. You always have to take into account the rivalry, the division, all that stuff. So, man, fired up this week. So, Steve Gio's Miami Dolphins pick in the league where they play for pay. Jets at Dolphins, Hard Rock Stadium, 1 o'clock. Dolphins favored by 6.5. Over under is 45. Very, very interesting game. I'm going to pick the Dolphins. I think they'll come out and I think they'll win the game, but I don't think they're going to win it in the convincing fashion that I'd like them to and that they need to. I think it's going to be a bit of a nail biter. I think they're going to make some of their stupid mistakes. It's going to be kind of like a stupid mistake fest with the Jets where they're basically just going tit for tat on who wants to be the worst team. But I think eventually the Dolphins pull away, and I think they will win the game. We'll call it 27-20. So take the over. Probably be close there, though. But then you'll go into Houston, I feel, next week, and you just won't feel great about it because you're going to say, man, we played our game this year, because at this point of the season, you are what you are. But let's hope we can get a win. We always want to see home game wins. We want to, quote-unquote, leave the season alive, which it would do for another week. And who knows, maybe we believe in miracles and we can reel off 5 straight. But if you do that, it starts this week at home against the Jets. So thank everybody for joining us. We will see you next week. Let's go, Fins. Get tough in the trenches and get physical.